New York court just struck a crushing blow. Trump Tower, Donald Trump's ultimate power symbol, is being sealed off and prepared for liquidation. This isn't a drill. This isn't posturing. This is real-time enforcement against a former president of the United States. One of the most iconic buildings in Manhattan, Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, is no longer under Trump's control, and that's just the beginning. On January 18, 2026, Judge Arthur Engoron signed an unprecedented enforcement order authorizing New York state officials to seize and liquidate key Trump properties to satisfy a $464 million civil fraud judgment. The order specifically named the commercial floors of Trump Tower, his Westchester golf course, and a Manhattan office building as priority targets. Trump had 11 months to post a court-mandated appeal bond. He ignored it. He had opportunities to negotiate. He refused. Now, the courts have moved from warning to action. This isn't political theater, it's the law in motion. The message from the bench is deafening. No one, not even a former president, is above civil enforcement. And let's be clear, this isn't just a temporary freeze or a symbolic gesture. State agents showed up at Trump Tower, orders in hand, ready to assume control. According to multiple sources, building managers were told to stand down. Trump Organization staff were informed they no longer had decision-making authority over the premises. Smash that like button if this already feels historic, and hit subscribe, because this story is only getting hotter. What you're about to hear will shake the foundations of how justice, power, and defiance collide in America. We're going to walk through the full chain of events, how we got here, what's happening now, and what it means when a billionaire-turned-president faces the full weight of the law. Stay with me. The next chapter is where it gets wild. To understand how we reach the point of asset seizure, we need to rewind to where this legal firestorm first ignited, and why it exploded into something no one has seen before in American history. It all began in September 2022, when New York Attorney General Letitia James filed a sweeping civil lawsuit against Donald Trump, the Trump Organization, and 3 of his adult children. The accusation? A decade-long pattern of fraudulent financial misrepresentation. According to the complaint, Trump inflated the value of his assets by more than $2.2 billion in statements submitted to banks and insurers. And this wasn't an isolated mistake, it was, as James described, persistent, repeated, and intentional deception. From penthouses to golf resorts. The lawsuit alleged Trump routinely exaggerated square footage, brand value, and property valuations to secure more favorable loan terms and insurance coverage. One infamous example: Trump claimed his Manhattan triplex was 30,000 square feet, when documents later revealed it was closer to 11,000. The civil fraud trial that followed in late 2023 was anything but quiet. Judge Arthur Engoron presided over the proceedings, which included explosive testimony, missed deadlines, and combative courtroom behavior from Trump and his legal team. In February 2024, Engoron issued a final judgment. Trump was liable for civil fraud, and he and his company were ordered to pay $464 million in penalties and interest. But the court didn't stop there. It also barred Trump from holding executive positions in any New York company for 3 years, and began the countdown clock for enforcement. Trump's legal team had one lifeline: post an appeal bond to delay enforcement while higher courts reviewed the ruling. Under New York law, that bond must cover the full amount of the judgment in this case. Nearly $500 million. And here's where the fire spread. Despite being granted multiple extensions, Trump failed to post the bond. For nearly 11 months, his attorneys claimed he was either working on securing the amount or negotiating terms. But according to court records and sources close to the case, he made no serious effort to raise the money. No asset sales. No loan restructuring. No payment plans. Nothing. Meanwhile, Trump continued to publicly mock the judgment, dismissing it as illegal, politically motivated. and rigged. He went on social media to brag about his wealth, all while telling the courts he couldn't afford to comply. That contradiction became central to the court's rationale when the judge moved to enforcement. Legal experts began warning that the situation was deteriorating fast. Barbara McQuaid, former U.S. attorney, told MSNBC, "Trump seems to think the law doesn't apply to him. But the courts have limits and we're about to see what happens when a defendant crosses them." Smash that like button if you're starting to see how defiance turned into disaster. Because when you ignore a $464 million judgment and gamble that nothing will happen eventually, the law strikes back. By January 2026, the clock had run out. Donald Trump had spent nearly a year dodging the court's order to post a $464 million appeal bond. Deadlines had passed. Warnings had been issued. Patience had evaporated. And then it happened. On January 18th, Judge Arthur Engoron signed an explosive enforcement order that authorized New York State officials to begin immediate seizure of Trump's properties. This was not a threat. This was not a possibility. This was the green light, the legal equivalent of a tactical strike. The order named 7 properties as initial targets for asset seizure, starting with the commercial floors of Trump Tower, the Westchester Golf Club, and Trump's Wall Street office building. These weren't symbolic. These were strategic assets. High value, highly visible, and deeply tied to the Trump identity. In the order, Judge Engoron was blunt. He wrote that Trump's continued refusal to post the required bond constitutes deliberate and willful contempt of court. The judgment referenced Trump's public statements, dismissing the case as fake and corrupt, while at the same time refusing to engage in any lawful effort to satisfy the ruling. Even more damaging, the court cited evidence from Trump's own financial disclosures, which showed he had hundreds of millions in liquid assets, more than enough to post the bond. His refusal wasn't due to inability. It was due to defiance. The court had had enough. Sources close to the case revealed that Trump's legal team was caught off guard by how swiftly the judge moved. On January 17th, just one day before the order was signed, attorneys held an emergency meeting at Mar-a-Lago, trying to determine if any last-minute delay was possible. Christopher Keyes, Trump's lead attorney, reportedly told Trump in no uncertain terms, "The court is out of patience. If you do not act now, they will move to seize." Trump dismissed the warning, once again betting that the courts or politics would protect him. He was wrong. Legal analysts immediately called the move historic. Andrew Weissman, former general counsel for the FBI, stated on NBC, "This is not just a slap on the wrist. This is the civil system, bringing full enforcement down on a former president. We've never seen anything like it." And neither had Trump. That same night, Trump took to Truth Social, blasting Judge Engoron as a Democratic operative and threatening legal retaliation against Letitia James. But the damage was done. The order was signed, and it was being executed within 24 hours. Smash that like button if you feel the ground shifting. Because it just did. This wasn't about politics anymore. This was about enforcement. The kind that knocks on doors, that carries real consequences. And as you're about to see in the next part of this story, it doesn't just stop with paperwork. It walks straight into Trump Tower. January 19th, 2026, 10:05 a.m. 5th Avenue, Manhattan. A black SUV pulls up to the front entrance of Trump Tower. 3 officials from the New York Attorney General's office, accompanied by 2 deputy sheriffs, step out. They're holding court orders. They're not here for a meeting. They're here to take control. Witnesses describe what happened next as surreal. The group enters the building through the main commercial entrance. According to building security personnel, the team bypasses the public lobby and proceeds directly to the Trump Organization's property management office on site. They present documents. Official. Signed. enforceable orders to the building manager, informing him that effective immediately, the state of New York is assuming legal possession of the commercial portions of the tower. Staff are stunned. Some watch in silence. Others whisper in shock. A few begin calling supervisors. Unsure whether to continue operations, state officials quickly establish a temporary command center inside one of the vacant conference rooms on the mezzanine level. According to sources who spoke with Reuters, they immediately begin cataloging lease agreements, notifying tenants of the change in ownership, and reviewing building revenue streams. And just like that, Trump Tower is no longer under Trump's control. Let that sink in. The same building that's appeared in global headlines for 4 decades. The glittering glass tower that served as the stage for The Apprentice, as campaign HQ for the 2016 election, and as the architectural embodiment of Donald Trump's brand, is now being managed by the state, pending liquidation. Smash that like button if you never thought you'd live to see this moment. Because no one, not even the people inside the tower, did. One longtime employee, who requested anonymity, told CNN, "I've worked here for 27 years. I never thought I'd see the day the state walks in and takes over. Never. And while the state's actions may seem swift, they were anything but impulsive." According to legal analysts, once the court signed the enforcement order, New York Attorney General Letitia James had both the authority and obligation to move quickly before any last-minute attempts to move assets, transfer control, or obstruct the process could occur. And Letitia James made it clear this was no empty gesture. At 2 p.m., standing in front of the New York Supreme Court building, she held a brief but unambiguous press conference. Today, the Office of the Attorney General has executed the court's order to assume possession of Trump Tower's commercial asset. We will proceed with liquidation according to the law, as we would with any other defendant. No fire, no shouting, just cold legal force. The ripple effects were immediate. Real estate brokers began circulating rumors of possible upcoming auctions. Tenants quietly contacted attorneys. Political strategists started cutting campaign ads with B-roll of sheriffs walking into Trump Tower. This was no longer a courtroom drama. It had become a visual reality. Legal observers say this could be just the start. If Trump fails to meet bond requirements or violates any terms moving forward, his Westchester golf course and Wall Street building are next. You've heard of properties being foreclosed. You've seen repossessions in movies. But this is a hostile legal takeover of a billionaire's empire in real time. And if you think Trump's going to take this quietly, think again. The backlash is coming. And the stakes just got higher. The question on everyone's mind, judges, reporters, even Trump's own attorneys, is simple. Why didn't he just pay the bond? After all, Donald Trump has spent decades branding himself as a billionaire real estate titan. The private jet, the skyscrapers, the golf resorts, the golden elevator. On stage and online, he boasts of a net worth in the billions. So why, when faced with a $464 million civil judgment, did he not secure the required appeal bond? Let's break it down. Under New York law, when a civil judgment is issued, a defendant who wishes to appeal must post a bond, essentially a guarantee that if the appeal fails, the money will still be available. The full amount of the judgment must be covered. In Trump's case, that meant $464 million plus interest from February 2024 to January 2026. Trump was given multiple chances to post that bond. He asked for time. He was granted it. He claimed he was working with insurers. The court waited, but no bond came. And while Trump was telling the courts he couldn't secure the money, he was telling the public a different story. On Truth Social, he posted brash statements declaring himself a victim of political persecution. He insisted he had plenty of money. He mocked the case. But he didn't pay. In private, his attorneys were panicking. Multiple outlets reported that major surety companies refused to issue a bond for that amount using real estate as collateral. Especially given the fraud ruling, Trump could have sold assets, restructured loans, or even offered a partial payment plan. He did none of those. Then, in March 2026, after nearly 11 months of stalling, a New York appellate court reduced the bond amount to $175 million, giving Trump a 10-day deadline to comply. Only then, when his properties were already being seized, did he act. Legal analysts call it one of the most reckless miscalculations in modern legal history. Andrew Weissman, former federal prosecutor, told MSNBC, Trump thought the courts wouldn't dare touch him. He gambled everything and nearly lost more than the judgment itself, because here's the truth. Liquidation sales don't fetch full market value. If Trump had posted the bond early, he could have kept control, delayed enforcement, and fought the case on appeal. Instead, by delaying and defying, he risked losing hundreds of millions more in asset value. So, was it about money or ego? Some say Trump genuinely believed he was untouchable. Others think he didn't want to liquidate flagship assets like Trump Tower, because doing so would shatter the myth of invincibility he's built for decades. Either way, the consequences are unfolding in real time. The legal system gave him every opportunity. And now, it's doing what it does to every defendant who refuses to comply. Drop a comment if you think this was stubbornness, strategy, or both, and hit subscribe. Because next up, we're watching the Trump brand unravel in broad daylight. Trump didn't just build buildings, he built a brand. A myth. A name that once symbolized luxury, dominance, and untouchable wealth. That brand was etched in gold across skylines, stitched into ties, and stamped on skyscrapers from Las Vegas to Istanbul. But now, that brand is collapsing. And it's happening live, in full view of the world. The seizure of Trump Tower's commercial floors is more than a legal event, it's a branding catastrophe. For decades, Trump Tower wasn't just a piece of real estate. It was the epicenter of the Trump mythos. It hosted celebrities, world leaders, and business moguls. It served as Trump's personal fortress, campaign headquarters, and TV backdrop. Now, state officials are managing its leases. Court-appointed representatives are preparing it for liquidation. And here's the brutal financial reality. In normal conditions, Trump Tower's commercial real estate could fetch upwards of $290 million. But in a forced sale, industry analysts expect prices to drop by 30 to 40% or more. That means Trump could lose over $100 million in value just from one property. And it doesn't stop there. If Trump fails to comply with the reduced bond terms or violates court conditions, more assets are on the chopping block. His Westchester golf course, a prestige property, his 40 Wall Street office building, a landmark trophy in the financial district. All at risk, all branded, all vulnerable to the same fate. But it's not just about the money. This is about perception, reputation, credibility. In the world of high finance and real estate, perception is value. When a developer's flagship asset is seized by the state on fraud grounds, lenders start backing away. Insurers raise rates, partners reconsider deals. That golden name on the top of a building becomes a warning label, not a selling point. Barbara McQuaid, legal analyst and former U.S. attorney, put it plainly. Whether or not Trump wins his appeal, the damage to his business reputation is done permanently. End quote. For decades, Trump used his real estate to project strength. Now, those very assets are being used as evidence of fraud, leverage for debt collection, and, most painfully, proof of vulnerability. Let's be clear. This is not bankruptcy. This is not a voluntary reorganization. This is not a market downturn. This is a court-ordered dismantling of an empire, brick by branded brick. Smash that like button if you're seeing the full picture now. The Trump brand wasn't built to withstand this kind of public unraveling. And the next few weeks will determine just how far and how fast that unraveling goes. Stay with me. Because next, we dive into the political firestorm this has ignited, as news of the Trump Tower seizure swept across media outlets. The political firestorm ignited instantly. Within hours, the Trump campaign issued a defiant statement, accusing the New York court of orchestrating a targeted attack to derail his 2026 presidential bid. They called it a radical leftist assault, framed the asset seizure as deliberate election interference, and vowed to fight back with everything they had. Trump himself went on a rampage across Truth Social. In post after post, he denounced the seizure as illegal, called Judge Engoron a partisan disgrace, and described Attorney General Letitia James as a racist, whose only mission was to destroy him. He insisted his properties would never be sold, that the court order was unconstitutional, and that higher courts would soon intervene. He even threatened to countersue everyone involved. On conservative news channels, pundits echoed the fury. Fox News ran wall-to-wall coverage, with anchors describing the scene at Trump Tower as a weaponization of civil courts. Right-wing influencers took to social media with hashtags like #SaveTrumpTower and #ElectionInterferenceNow, claiming this was the moment American democracy officially crossed the line. And yet, while the political rhetoric soared, the legal foundation held firm. Inside Trump's inner circle, panic was growing. Advisors were reportedly split. Some urged Trump to seek an emergency federal stay. Others feared that fighting the state's authority would only deepen the damage. They knew the images of court officials walking into Trump Tower weren't just legal trouble, they were political poison. Footage of sheriffs entering the building was already being cut into opposition ads, with one super PAC flashing the words, "If he can't manage his own empire, how can he lead a nation?" Legal analysts didn't hold back. Renato Mariotti, former federal prosecutor, said flatly that Trump's response was pure political theater. When you're screaming about the judge but refusing to explain why you ignored the court order for 11 months, you've lost the legal ground, he told MSNBC. This wasn't just a legal setback. It was the unraveling of a campaign narrative. The billionaire fighter, the deal-maker, the man who always wins, was now watching state agents strip away his most prized asset. And the whole world was watching with him. This case was never just about dollars and cents. From the moment Trump refused to post the appeal bond, this became a test not just of his defiance, but of the legal system's capacity to enforce its own rulings. If a man with billions in real estate, a global brand, and a political movement behind him can ignore a $464 million civil judgment for nearly a year and still walk free without consequences, then the foundation of civil enforcement itself begins to crack. The law, at its core, depends on one terrifyingly simple principle: that it applies to everyone, that it doesn't care how many buildings carry your name, how many followers chant for you, or how often you call the process unfair. If the court says you owe, you pay. Or you appeal properly. Or you face the consequences. And that's exactly what is happening now. This isn't punishment. This is procedure. And that's what makes it powerful. Judge Engoron made it clear. Every accommodation was offered. Every deadline extended. Every chance given. And Trump chose none of them. Not because he couldn't, but because he believed he didn't have to. He gambled on his persona, outweighing the power of the law. And now, brick by branded brick, that gamble is collapsing in real time. Let's be honest. This is no longer just a court battle. It's a symbolic reckoning. A warning shot across the bow of unchecked power. And whether you agree with Trump or not, whether you believe this is justice or political warfare, the implications stretch far beyond one man's properties. Because if the most powerful figures in the country can defy courts and face no enforcement, what chance does the system have with anyone else? Speaking personally, this moment is unsettling and necessary. Unsettling, because it reveals how close the system came to blinking. Necessary, because it proves it still has teeth. The sight of sheriffs stepping into Trump Tower, not for show but for legal execution, is a reminder that even the loudest voices can't always shout down the law. And in a democracy, that's exactly the point. That said, this content is for informational and analytical purposes only. It does not represent legal advice or political endorsement. All details are based on publicly available records and credible news reporting. The purpose is to inform, not to inflame. But here we are. Trump Tower's commercial assets are under state control. More properties may follow. Liquidation is real. The money is due. The deadlines are over. And the myth of invincibility has cracked. So the final question is not just about Trump. It's about the system. Will it hold? Will it follow through? Or will it, once again, stop short when power pushes back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And subscribe right now, because this story is far from over. What happens in the coming days may not just redefine one man's legacy, it may redefine the meaning of equal justice in America.